newest instrument from Native Instruments, Glaze. This is one of the Play Series instruments. I'm going to show off a few of the things that are specific to Glaze, what make it kind of awesome. And then I'm going to show you a real deep breakdown on these Play instruments. So just check the chapters of this video if you want to skip the parts on Glaze or vice versa. So Glaze is a vocal heavy instrument here. Comes with a ton of vocal patches, and it also has some vocal phrases in it, which I think are the things that really set this library apart. So we'll have a look at some of these ones that they call riff and run presets, and then we'll get into the real details of these instruments and as they apply to all of the Play Series instruments, not just Glaze. And just a little bit behind the scenes, make sure you watch the Glaze story. There's a great video where the two creators of this library, Sauce and Roshad, talk about how they made this library, why they made this library, and yeah, really inspiring videos. Definitely worth watching that. Anyways, let's get right into what's in Glaze. So first off, as you can hear in this little idea, I've got these beautiful riff and run presets happening. So let's have a look at those. If I look at the instrument, we can see that it says Sun Riff 3 A minor. So these are sound sources that we're looking at. So we'll break down those in a little bit as well. But sound source, and basically when I hold down a key, so we are hearing layer A and layer B. And if I turn off layer B, it seems to me there's no way for you to time stretch or pitch shift these riffs as it comes through in Glaze. So what you would have to do is use Machine's abilities to time stretch and pitch shift if you wanted to slow them down or if you wanted to put them in a different key. So hopefully they figure out some way to change that in the future. But as for now, all you got to do is follow my sampling methods on changing pitch and changing time. So I'll put a link to that video in the description. Very important and totally applies to this kind of stuff. As for now, all I did is I played them in. And then played a lower one, F, F sharp, and then back to the A minor. So we've got these beautiful chords happening. When you load up a riff patch, you're going to have only those vocal riffs on certain keys. So if I play like a C sharp, there's no riff on that. All I'm hearing is layer B. So that's something to be aware of right off the bat. That's going to be something kind of specific as well. It'd be nice if those were maybe colored different on our keyboard here. That would be very helpful, I think, to people as well. So hopefully in a future update or so. Let's just load up an initialized patch here, turn off layer B, and I'm going to go over to the sound source browser here. And here we can see all of the sound sources. So Glaze and other Play instruments are going to be a mixture of samples and waveforms, and these are the raw materials for your patches. So if we look at Sun, that's going to be a certain singer. And if I go over to some of the other sound sources, we get into some waveforms here. And then we get into some riffs. And if you click on, say, A minor, if I play an A sharp, there's nothing there. If I go to A sharp minor, so we can hear that a lot of them were sung in different keys. So that kind of gives you, I'll go up to, yeah, once we get to C minor, we just need to go down the octave to hear that same riff. So we can hear that same riff is already in the different keys. So we've got the pitch figured out. Then we would just have to figure out some time stretching stuff that we could do with Machine. But these vocal riffs are incredible. They sound amazing. And there's a whole bunch of them. So they're mapped out along the keyboard. They're not all the way up and down the keyboard, but let's go over to another one. So another thing you could do, of course, with Machine is you could choose a riff like this one. Okay, so I've got that one played in, and all I would need to do is take that sample. I could do the drag and drop, just click on the waveform right here, drag that onto a new sound, and now I'm going to turn off this other sound, and now I've got that sample loaded here as an audio module. All I need to do is click the 4D encoder, change that to a sampler. And then now I'm going to go over to sampling. I'm going to edit that. And let's do a normalize. And then what I could do is I could do the usual things like slice it up. Let's just go manual. So now I've got a bunch of slices that I just dropped in there. I can put those all down onto the group. Anyways, you get the idea. So now I've just chopped this up using it in a different song. And then of course I could go in and time stretch that if I need to and keep it in the same key and all that kind of stuff. And then as far as the patches go, what I would do is go over to the browser here in Machine or in Complete Control and just start looking through the patches this way. So some really cool leads. Let's load that one up. Then we've got some other interesting ones. We've got melodic sequences. So that's using the sequencer, which we'll talk about in a moment. And then we've got more of these riffs. Let's have a listen to this one. So C minor. So let's say I wanted to work with this one. First I'm going to figure out the tempo. Tap that in. Okay, so just for fun, let's take that whole thing. We're going to copy it onto a new sound source just by clicking that waveform, drag and drop it, and now I'm going to mute that other one, and we're going to leave that as an audio module, and then we're just going to try changing the tempo. Now the tempo has changed. Because we're on an audio module, the tempo just automatically changes. And it keeps it in the same key, which is perfect. So now let's put in a little beat there, just for fun. Now we're going to go over to our bass patch, which is also from Glaze here, and we'll put it in the key of C minor. So on to the details of the Play Series instruments. Let's try and do this as quick as we can and give you a brief overview of everything. First page of every Play Series instrument is this interface right here. And if you're in one of these other menus and you want to get back to that main one, all you have to do is click whatever you're on again. That'll take you to this main page. You can see the two layers. So we've got two layers in this patch, the sun, ah, and the kip, So if I turn the layer A off, there's layer B, and then layer A. So always have two layers for these patches, but you don't always have to have both of them on. If you have two layers on, switching this balance will do more of A and less of B, and vice versa if you go the other way. On the bottom, we've got a whole bunch of macros, including the sauce, which is kind of new with the Glaze instrument, but all sauce is a whole bunch of other parameters that are changing at the same time. So if I crank up sauce, We can hear like a filter coming in there, and we can hear some delay. Take it off, and we don't hear it. And again, if we want to look at the different sound sources, all we have to do is click on the title right here, and that opens up the sound source browser. So I can go in and find a riff, or I can find more of a waveform, or I can find like just a sample that's just been stretched all across the keyboard. Okay, so let me turn layer B back on for a second. Let's go over and look at the sound menu, which is the next page to look at. And here we can see two different layers, and we can see this little lock thing. What it means is you can adjust all of these parameters specific to layer A, or you can have them affect both layers at the same time. So there are some times where you just want to treat both patches in the same way. Other times you want them completely separate. So that's what the little lock does. So now if I adjust the transpose, we can see that it changes it on layer A and layer B at the same time. Adjust the tune, and it changes it on B. So same thing, vice versa, go back and forth. It doesn't matter which one you're on. But once you make a change, now it's going to be the same for both. Let's turn the lock off. We'll stick to layer A. And we'll set the pan. Anytime you want to reset a parameter here, just command click it, and that resets it. Next things to look at, this little button right here just means that if I play any key, it's not going to change the note. And if I turn it on, the keyboard, of course, will track the notes. Next, we've got transpose. Let's turn that back to, or command click it, get back to 0, and we'll turn the tuning back to normal. Panning left and right, you can have the two layers panned differently. And then we've got overall volume as well as the volume up here. Next thing we've got is some effects. So we can, these aren't the effects like we have in this whole menu where we can add delay and stuff like that. But this is more of what you can do to the sound source itself. So you can reduce the sample rate or sample frequency. You can see we could start at 48 kilohertz and then take it down. And then same thing with crush. This bit crushing, getting that distortion. We've got noise, and then we've got the color of the noise, which is kind of like filtering out some of the noise frequencies. And then we can turn those on and off. And then of course we've got a filter with a whole bunch of filter types. And with the filter, traditional filter things apply to this as well, of course. And then the key track means as you move up and down the keyboard, does the filter get brighter or darker? Or does it just stay, the filter stays exactly the same throughout the whole keyboard range? So that's what key track stands for. Next, we've got the LFO section. And the LFO section is kind of confusing on these play instruments at first, but let me just show you how it works, and you'll be like, okay, that is super simple. I actually can handle that. So if you go over to this little modulation section right here, we can go, all right, what is happening with LFO1? And if I click on this little button right here, we can see that parameters change, some things pop up. And basically how it works is this is where you choose what LFO1 does. And by clicking on this button, you now get to choose what does LFO1 apply to. So you can see these little tiny sliders that pop up next to some of the parameters when you click on certain modulation things over here. So if I go on LFO1, right now, LFO1 doesn't have anything here applied to it, but watch what happens if I crank up the filter. Now we've got this sine wave is moving this cutoff knob like this. It's kind of like going wing, wing, wing. It's moving the cutoff back and forth. So it's effectively the same thing as going like this. That's all an LFO is ever designed to do, is just to modulate something, to change some parameter over time and to have it repeating. So that's what we've got. We've got our filter being changed. I can change the rate of it right here. Quarter notes, 16th notes. Now let's go to waveform and change it to a sawtooth wave. Okay, up, jumps up, and then comes down. We can also have it fade in. So say if we were adjusting vibrato. So let's take the filter off of this. And again, I just command click to take the LFO off of this filter. And with vibrato, we'd probably want that to adjust the tuning. And we probably want it to be more of a sine wave. And all you have to do to change that here is click and drag up and down. So there's our sine wave. And then let's maybe dial that back just a little bit. And then what we can do is have this fade in means it doesn't start right away. So if it's at 0, it starts right away. Fade in, we can hear it straight, and then the wobble starts. So that's what the fade in means. And then we've got another LFO right here. We can do the same thing, same kind of thing with the modulation over here to some other control, like the mod wheel. So that is how the LFOs work, and that's how the other modulation things work as well. We also have a modulation envelope, and we can also go in and adjust the amplitude envelope the same way. So I can decide to have this fade in a little slower. Now it's more like a pad. And then let's take the release and make it a lot longer. That's the main details of the sound page. If we go to the effects page, there we can see all the different types of effects we can apply from Kontakt. I can go to any other of the effect slots and I can add all sorts of effects. I can reorder them just by clicking and dragging this little tab. And I can turn them off just like that. So let's go to the reverb one. Turn it down a little bit. Let's make the size a bit bigger. Great. Okay, so effects I think are probably pretty self-explanatory. And then we've got this next one, which is the sequencer, which I've said in previous videos is probably one of my favorite features of Play instruments. And if I go over to pitch and velocity, that's where we can go start traditionally adding in some kind of sequence that has, you know, up to 16 different steps. I'm going to start by one note. And we're going to turn it on. Don't forget to turn it on. And so we can see right now that it's starting on step 16, which is kind of silly. Let's make that start on step 1. And I'm going to reset this, command click on it. Or control on a PC. Sorry guys. I can have my velocity to trigger. I can make this go a lot faster, so let's make that 16th notes. There we go. And then of course we can change pitch. Let's go up by a fifth. Okay, so I've got a little sequence put in there. And my song so far is in C minor, so my favorite feature here is the fact that you can choose scales. So I'm going to go to C minor. So now what's going to happen is it's going to actually change the notes to fit into the key of C minor. Now watch what happens when I play like an F sharp. It's actually rounding it off to an F because there is no F sharp in the key of C minor. Over here we've got the rate. We can change the swing, so this swings a little bit more. And then we can see we can start at a totally different step if we want. We have latch and retrigger. Latch just means it's just going to keep playing. Let the note go. And then we've got retrigger, which is going to start over. Every time you play a new note, it's going to start the pattern over again. And then over here, scale by velocity just means right now it's just triggering the notes according to the velocities I have triggered in the sequencer. And if I turn that on, now if I play softly, it's going to scale all the notes a lot softer or louder. Next thing we've got is the routing. I can have this go to layer A, layer B, or both, or none. Then we've got the steps, so we can shorten the steps, we can have them go forward and backward, and then the gate is just how long is each note. Or short. And so we've got 6 different macro slots that we can also sequence. And that's where we need to go to the macros page. So right now, let's have a look at macro 1. Macro 1 is not assigned to anything. So how do we assign macros? Well, you go over to something like this sound page, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this tiny little button right here next to macro 1 down below. And what that allows me to do is then go over to a parameter, say like the cutoff, and I just click on it. And now if I go over to the macros page, we can see that layer A cutoff is assigned to macro 1. So now I could go to machine and I could go to my macro 1, which is at 50% right now. And you can see that I'm scanning through this almost graph right here. And there's some interesting things you can do with this as well. You can have a whole bunch of different parameters assigned to one macro. So that's what this sauce knob is often doing, is it's got a whole bunch of things that it's controlling, and that's how you get sort of more dramatic results. So now let's go back over to the sequencer and see what we can do with macro 1. So we know that it's controlling the filter, but let's just try doing some of this. First time you do this, you're gonna be like, why is this not changing anything? And that's because you have to adjust the amount. So I'm gonna crank this way up. Let's change the gate. And you can get some really interesting results with just sequencing the macros, so having them do some pulsing and rhythmic stuff. So the next one is the macros, which we've already talked about. And then on the far right, we've got this little settings thing. With these settings, you can choose things like mono and legato. Let's turn off the sequencer for now. So if I turn on mono, only lets me play one note. If I turn on legato, it's not going to do the attack of the note. It's going to continue on through the envelope. Next, we've got the velocity curve. You can adjust how the velocity plays from your keyboard, how it triggers. So next we could choose some splits. So I could have, say, the low key for this one to be, I could click on it, have the low key be C and the high key be F1. And then on layer B, I could say, let's put low key at F sharp 1 and the high key up here at C5. If I turn that on, we can see a keyboard split. So you can see it on the keyboard. It actually gives us different colors, which is really nice. And I could have and then we've got pitch bend right here, and then we've got glide as well. So watch what happens if I crank up the glide. So it's gliding between the notes. So watch what happens here. And you can hear with constant rate, it's going to take longer to get up to a higher note that's farther away or lower. And if I set it to constant time, it's going to take the same amount of time no matter how far the interval. You can hear that's all exactly the same time. So you can get some really interesting effects by having that constant time set on. So I think that's probably enough for the Play special features video, and hopefully that allows you to dig way into all of these Play instruments. And most of you who are watching this video probably have a bunch of Play instruments already. A bunch come with complete and stuff like that. So make sure you dig into those features and start making your own patches, because these instruments are super powerful, but part of it is creating your own sounds out of this huge library of sound sources and stuff like that. So make sure you hit the subscribe button and the bell, and thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.